Hey there, guitar fanatics. Would it surprise you to find out that 90% of new guitar players quit within a year, and that a high percentage of the players that do keep going never progress past the beginner level? And it's been my experience as a teacher that there are loads of players that, for various reasons, get stuck at the intermediate level, even though they want to be really good. Now, if you fall into that last category, this video is for you. We're going to look at 3 guitar concepts that almost every intermediate player needs to improve on to get to that next level. Let's dig in. What is it that's almost always the culprit when a player is not seeing the kind of progress that they want? Now, keep in mind, the main focus of this channel is learning to play lead guitar, but this applies to really any aspect of playing guitar. The problem, as I see it, is twofold, but the issues are closely related. The first issue is one I see time and time again, and I call it dabbler syndrome, which is basically half-assed learning concepts that you need to really get down under your fingers if you want to make progress. The flip side of that coin is not putting in the effort, both mental and physical, to really learn how to implement the concepts that you learn, to really put them into use. And not just to implement them, but to push beyond what a teacher tells you and start making discoveries on your own. More on that later, but the discoveries and the connections that you stumble onto yourself are going to be the ones that you learn most deeply. And when we feel stuck on guitar, that obviously leads to frustration. Frustration can cause us to make bad decisions. We might get bored with our playing, and we might start to jump from lesson to lesson or from style to style and become even more of a dabbler. We might start spending less time with the instrument, so when we do pick it up, we feel perpetually rusty. I don't want that to be you. I love the guitar. I'm excited to pick it up every day, and I want you to feel that excitement for playing also. So we're going to get into 3 playing concepts that are issues that need to be overcome to bridge that skill gap. As I like to say, this is for intermediate players that want to get good. And I feel like these concepts are equally important, so they're not ranked, but we've got to start somewhere. Let's jump right into intermediate progress barrier number 1, which is not paying attention to the chord changes that you're soloing over. Now, I love a down-home blues as much as anyone, and yes, we can get away with using 1 minor pentatonic scale to solo over a blues. And sometimes if we play pop or rock, we might be thinking, well, I'll leave playing through chord changes to the jazzers. I don't want to play jazz anyway. But the truth is, if you're not addressing chord changes, your playing is never going to be anywhere near as melodic and as tasteful as it could be. Even over a 3-chord blues, addressing the chord changes will make your playing sound so much more professional. And it gives you so many more options of what to play. Let's take a look at the most popular chord progression in pop and rock music, the 1-5-6-4, and we're going to do it in the key of D. And let me give you a few ideas on how to get progressively better at playing through chord changes. That 1-5-6-4 progression in D, that would give us the chords D major, A major, B minor, and G major. And we can get started by playing 2 notes per chord. We concentrate on the chord tones. For D, that would give us a D for the root, F sharp for the 3rd, A for the 5th, and C sharp for the major 7th. Get started by playing the root and the 3rd for each chord. For D, that would give us D and F sharp. For A, that would give us an A and a C sharp. For B, B and D, B minor that is. And for the G chord, that would give us G and B. And once we're finding roots and 3rds all over the fretboard, we could go to the root and the 5th, which are the notes of the power chord. But play them in different spots on the fretboard. So if you're feeling comfortable with roots and fifths, how about playing the fifth and the third in the next octave above it for each chord? For D, that would be A and F sharp. For A, that would give us an E and a C sharp. For B, we'd have F sharp and D. And for G, we'd have D and B. That's a really cool intervallic sound. And that could lead to our next idea, which would be adding the root to what we just played, which gives us what we call a spread or open triad. This is one of the most melodic sounds I know of. And it was made famous by Eric Johnson as a trademark of his style. Here's a shape for each chord with the root on the A string. Here's D, A, B minor, and G. That's a really amazing sound. And of course, you can work through those and discover different inversions and different voicings all around the fretboard on the different string sets. And as a last idea, start working on using the pentatonic scale that matches each chord in a progression. Now, ideally, you want to know your pentatonics well enough that you don't have to jump all over the fretboard, but it's totally fine to get started by using one pattern at a time and moving it around. So over our progression, I'm going to use the same shape for each chord, which is pattern 1 of minor pentatonic or pattern 5 of major pentatonic. So we'd have D major, A major, B minor, which is the same scale as D major, but I'll play it from B to B, and G major. And you can hear the chords there as plain as day. Now, if you're thinking, oh crap, I don't know triads and seventh arpeggios well enough to find chord tones, or pentatonic scales well enough to change the scale as the chords change, well, that's a major red flag, and it's kind of shining a spotlight on other things that are holding you back. Get in the woodshed, get those techniques down, and then you can start to apply them creatively. I'm going to play over a backing track and mix up 3 of the ideas that we just discussed. Playing just the root and the third for each chord, playing a spread triad for each chord, and lastly, playing the pentatonic scale that matches each chord. Here we go. All right, we're on to intermediate progress barrier number 2. And this is a big one if you really want to go from sounding like a newer player to a higher level guitarist. And the concept that's holding a lot of us back is having really limited phrasing, really bad phrasing, or really bad limited phrasing. There are different aspects of phrasing, of course. But today I'm talking about the different nuances or ornaments, if you will, that we put on notes to make our guitar sound more like a human voice. I see phrasing as the secret sauce that separates players. You can hear 2 guitarists play the exact same notes, and the one that has better phrasing is going to sound better every time. Let's take a really simple idea like moving from the E note at the 5th fret of the B string to the F sharp at the 7th fret. And playing that over a D chord. Ask yourself, how many different ways can I phrase those 2 notes, and how good do I sound doing it? Let me give you 5 quick phrasing ideas for just this little 2-note figure. Idea number one, we could slide into the final note. This one's easy, sliding from the E to the F sharp. We can also slide into the E and then up into F sharp. Idea number two, we're going to slide past our final target note, back to our starting note, and then into the final target note like this. I would slide from E to G, back to E, and then into F sharp. Or I could slide from E to A, back to E, and then to F sharp. We could also do a little variation where we slide into our final target note, then to a note above it, back to the E, and then back to that F sharp. This technique is kind of the gateway into getting some Derek Trucks sounding licks without using the actual slide. Idea number three, delayed vibrato. Nothing says noob to me like a player that starts their vibrato immediately when they land on a note. That doesn't sound like a great singer. We want to hold that note for a moment and then start to apply vibrato. And gradually increase the width and intensity. It's very vocal sounding, and when I hear that, I know the player I'm listening to has good control of their vibrato. Idea number four, we're going to call this pre-bend, release, and slide. We're going to pre-bend the E up to F sharp, so we bend the note before we pick it, release that bend, and slide into the F sharp. We could even combine that with sliding past the target note, that idea, and get something like this. Idea number five, we're going to go all David Gilmour, and we're going to bend past the final target note and come back to it. We could even do this a couple of different ways. Bend the E all the way up to G, release it down to F sharp. Or this is really cool. We're going to bend the E to F sharp, then to G, release back to F sharp, then release the bend entirely and slide from E into F sharp. Intermediate progress barrier number three is another big one, and we're going to call it difficulty integrating techniques. Now, what do I mean by integrating techniques? Well, what are some common techniques that we use to solo? Things like scales and arpeggios, obviously, different note groupings and subdivisions, different phrasing techniques, something esoteric like tapping. And all too often when I hear intermediate players, they might know several of these techniques, but they haven't put in the work to come up with licks and phrases that combine these techniques. So we hear something that ends up sounding like pieces and parts. Here's a scale run, here's an arpeggio, oops, let me throw in a tapping lick. And it all sounds very disjointed, where the players that seem to sound the best flow from technique to technique within the same licks and phrases. For instance, over a D chord, here's a cool lick that starts off with a D major pentatonic scale run, and then goes into a B minor arpeggio, and then it's going to descend through several iterations of a B minor ninth arpeggio. There was several different things happening in that lick, but they all flow together. And yes, this kind of fluidity takes time, effort, and practice. But I didn't just roll out of bed one morning and play that lick. That lick came together through lots of experimentation, literally just messing around and calling it practice. To get started integrating your ideas, take a couple of techniques that you already know really well. For instance, we might know E minor 7 and E minor pentatonic. And we could go up to the 7th fret and play that E minor 7th idea. And then we ask ourselves, well, how do I get up to that 12th fret area to play pattern 1 of E minor pentatonic. So here's E minor 7 again. We could slide up a couple of frets and play D, E, G, E, and D of E minor pentatonic as a bridge. And then slide up again to the 12th fret, and now we're in the go zone. So we could play right down the scale like that, or we could get really crazy and maybe go into some Eric Johnson style groupings of 5. And you just keep working on a lick like that, expanding, experimenting, and you just might blow your own mind with what you come up with. And this leads me to what might be the biggest reason of all that I see so many intermediate players get stuck. It's because they don't push themselves to really learn, and most importantly, put into use the skills that they're trying to build. It's like they got some information from a teacher or a video or wherever, and they might learn it well enough to play it in whatever key it was presented in, but they don't go any further. You gotta play this stuff in every key, in different time signatures. Adapt major ideas into minor ideas and vice versa. Combine a new idea with other ideas and techniques you already know. The students that I have that make massive progress are the ones that leave the lesson and they get to work on not just learning a concept, but putting that concept to use. And the next time I see them, they've taken it way further than what we talked about in the lesson. Students that stagnate, they never push that envelope. It's like they're continuously waiting for something good to happen, but they're never taking the action to make it happen. So hopefully the ideas in this video will get you fired up and moving down a new and exciting path with your playing. Guitar, it's the greatest instrument in the world. I want you to have fun playing it, and I'll see you soon.